So what are my closing thoughts on active imagination? So I guess the first place to start here is I've only been at it for a couple weeks, right? A little over a couple weeks. And I don't feel like I've ever really grasped how to do the practice correctly. And so I've kind of been coming at it from like two different directions. And one direction seems to work a little bit better for me than the other. Where the first one I was trying was how it's described in this book here, Inner Work. And there's a big emphasis on like actually writing everything out as it happens. And the problem with that for me is, well, first of all, I was probably waiting for too strong a mental imagery to come up. So I'd wait for this, I'd pose a question to my subconscious, right? Wait for like strong mental imagery to come up. But then if that did happen, to try and exit out to write it down would blank everything out so strongly that I would, it would take minutes, 5-10 minutes maybe of me trying to quiet the mind down, get more strong mental imagery to come up, and then hopefully have that be the same mental imagery that I was in right before exiting out to write it down. So that didn't really seem to work for me. Plus, when I was doing that, it wasn't really audible. It still kind of felt like, didn't feel like I was getting actual answers from my subconscious. Almost felt like I was just kind of like, anticipating what the response was going to be, then kind of just making it up there, which he says in the book isn't necessarily even that bad of a thing. But then to adjust it a bit, I was going for less strong mental imagery. But then at that point, it kind of just felt like I was imagining scenarios in my head, where the one I was working with the most is the one he recommended in the book that worked best for him. So like he'd imagine himself walking down a beach, right? And then imagine that he comes into contact with some kind of archetypal dream figure or some dream figure in general. Then you can try to have this back and forth dialogue. And that's the dialogue you're supposed to be writing down, right? So I would do that in the mental imagery, but it still felt like I was just basically, I was never surprised in who was coming. It was like I was just kind of making up some archetype in my head to go ahead and meet. The main way I was trying to do it in the way that had the most closest thing to success, if I could say that, would be I'd be walking on the beach and I try to imagine there's like a figure way off in the distance. Then as I get closer, try not to influence who's going to show up in there, have that figure come into view as I get closer. Then every time I did that, it was like I already kind of knew, what the figure was going to be. And then the whole interacting with them and trying to ask them questions and not influence the response thing didn't really seem to work. And actually, it didn't seem really any different to me, at least, from just meditating on a potential, problem or question you want to pose to your subconscious, and then just meditating on that, keeping that at the forefront of your mind, and then seeing what kind of answers pop up from that. So doing that type of meditation practice felt basically like the same thing I was getting from me attempting the active imagination as it was described in here. But then the other way I've been going with it, and this is how I heard it described in a couple of YouTube videos, where like the psychiatrists, they weren't, at least it didn't seem, they didn't directly say this, but it didn't seem like they were making their clients actively write out their active imaginations as it was happening. It seemed more like they were treating it like dream recall, right? Where they would sit through the experience, then once it was done, they would come out, they would write down what happened and have all that there. And then they would bring that to the psychiatrist, and then they could try to talk through it and try to figure out what the root cause or problem was with that. So I was a lot better with that, and then doing that approach, I can get really strong like mental imagery to come up that I'm essentially seeing, basically like getting to my whole hypnagogic meditation thing. The other cool thing about that, and it's probably just because I'm so used to this hypnagogic space, but at that point, if I'm in this mental scene, I think too much, whatever, it blanks out, I can't see it anymore. If I don't try to come out to write. If I just stay where I'm at, lying down, close my eyes and try to return to that same image, then I could do that pretty consistently. So, that was, that seemed to kind of work a bit better for me. But even when I am in that state, and even in like my hypnagogic state, it's typically not audible to me, right? I can get there, I can be in the, be in whatever environment scenario that I'm in. I can kind of know what's going on if there is multiple dream characters there and there are things happening. So I'll know what's happening. Maybe if there are talking going on, I kind of know what's being said, but I don't actually hear it. But I'm getting to that state, I do find to be pretty interesting, and it was kind of what he described in here as what he would call like the most purest form of active imagination, where you don't imagine yourself walking down a beach or anything like that. You just blank out the mind, wait to see what mental imagery comes up, and then engage with the image that way, trying to do this whole active imagination thing. So I like that, doing it with my hypnagogic practice, because it really does give you like an actual view of kind of what's going on in your subconscious, not unlike what would happen in a regular REM style dream. But I do find that to be pretty interesting. But again, trying to get up in there and actually pose specific questions still seemed pretty much undoable, to me at least. So let me think. Geez, was that it? I mean, I guess that's basically it. I do think that active imagination probably works better for some people than others. As I said in the previous video, like I like my whole hypnagogic meditation thing. I try to explain it as best I can to people on the channel, but I'm sure a lot of people still can't wrap their minds around how to do it. And, you know, I think that's probably just because some people aren't as inclined to hypnagogic meditation, you know, as I am kind of towards active imagination, or at least how it seems so far. So in closing, I think it's a cool kind of practice. I do want to try keep it up, see if I can wrap my mind around it better and start feel like I'm getting better results. But as it stands now, to do it like the way I feel like it's described in this book seems basically the same as me just meditating on whatever question I want to pose to my subconscious, doing regular meditation style and seeing what pops up. And then, you know, to get to the deeper form of it, or even to do it, but without having to write it out, if I could just kind of sit there in the experience and then just kind of try to remember what happens in there and then bring that out to try and fish through it for meaning, that seemed to me to work a bit better. But then again, just to bring up some of my, like the general problem I have with dream interpretation, and in this case, hypnagogic, active imagination interpretation is, you know, there's going to be an unknown margin of error there, right? And so, and you can't really test against it to really figure out what the true answer was or not. Like, and all the answers I would get from some of these bigger questions I'm trying to pose into my head to fix whatever problem I have in my life, it was never like some answer that I couldn't have just thought up on my own, or I already kind of have in the back of my head I know I should be doing to fix things, right? So it was no like breaking type insight I seem to have gotten from the practice that I was trying. But anyway, oh yeah, and one more thing. And just to reiterate, I did bring this up in kind of one of the videos in this series, but it does seem to me that like trying to do this in a lucid dream where you can actually really get to that dream character, interact with them, truly have the sense that you're not influencing what the response is going to be, I think that would be the best. Now, I do know some Jungian people don't like lucid dreaming or don't like taking insights from lucid dreams as much as they like taking insights from regular dreams, because they think your conscious awareness being there is going to muck things up. But then one of my questions would be, I believe this was, at least from what this book says, you know, active imagination was like Jung's like preferred approach, even more than working with dreams. But if active imagination can work because your consciousness is there, you know, then why couldn't that work within a lucid dream as well? Anyway, just some thoughts. So rambled on there for a bit. I think we'll wrap it up there, and I'll keep up with the practice, and if I ever have more insights into it, I'll go ahead and do a follow-up. Until then, keep your active imagination, your meditation practices, and your lucid dreaming practice legit.